have confirmation of, for the notice to the media,
We do.
Good, very good.
and with 5 out of 7, I'll call, we have a quorum. Can I get an approval for the agenda?
So move.
A second.
Thank you. Mr. Lawless, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to this first budget workshop for the 25-26 budget. This will be sort of a high-level overview, kind of give you an idea of what we're seeing come in as far as information from the state at this point, kind of go over some of the challenges and issues that we expect to face, and then, of course, at any given time, if you have some feedback, some ideas you want to throw back, please interrupt me and chime right in, because at the end of the day, this is your budget. This is the board's budget for the district.
Wait on y'all for 5 minutes, so y'all can have a minute. Sorry I'm late. I was in another meeting in the back room, so.
We were just getting
Sorry,
started.
Mr. Lawless.
So, no, we're good. So just looking at some upcoming dates, at this point, the House and the Senate have both prepared their own versions of the state budget. The Senate passed it last week on Wednesday, and it'll now go back to the House for further amendment. And then from there, it'll go back to a conference committee, which is either next week or June, depending on which newsletter I read, but I think hopefully it'll be during May. They'll iron out any differences between those two versions of the budget before adjourning the session. The last day of the legislative session, sine die, is on May the 8th, which is next Thursday. As we're looking at our 25-26, our priorities, our challenges going into this season, first is to absorb the loss of the LEARNS grant, the likely loss of the LEARNS grant. I guess we haven't given up hope of that, but we had built a staffing model around that grant and having those funds available for another couple of years. So that has us, we have to have some tough conversations and keep on which priorities, what positions do we keep, who may need to be moved, et cetera. The direction going forward, we know the grant was going to come to an end, but we wanted to be able to work through that model, see what was working and what we thought we could change or improve. But now that, with the potential loss of the grant, that kind of brings that issue right to the forefront. Secondly, we already had a deficit budget going into this year, and we know that we can't continue to do that. So that was clearly something that we've got to rectify in this budget. Third is that we need to actually build our general fund balance, because as the size of the general fund grows, the size of the required general fund balance has to go up with it. In order to stay off the state's fiscal watch list, we have to maintain a fund balance of 8.3% of our general fund expenditures to stay off of that. They do have some flexibility. They kind of reached out to us when we first lost LEARNS and said, hey, we saw you lost this big grant. It's not a hard and fast 8.3%, but that's certainly not a line that we want to flirt with. And then fourth, we want to be able to provide cost of living increases to all of our district employees, to reward their hard work, their dedication to their job and to our district and our students. But also we have to compete with the private sector. We're not the only employer in town, and most of our people have options. So. Our own timeline here in the district, the first step is here tonight, this preliminary budget workshop where we will provide a high-level overview of our state funding and lay out our priorities. Again, if you have input that you would like to provide, things that you would like to see included, or potential changes that we could make to the budget, please feel free to chime in and offer those suggestions. I've got my pad here ready to jot down some notes. And then on May 19th, we will have our normal budget work session and also give first reading. I'll point out that that's 11 calendar days after the sine die, the last day of the legislative session, and then 11 days later we're making first reading of our budget, and that's only 6 business days after. So it's a crunch time for me and my department, primarily me, during this time of year. And then on June 23rd, we will have our the public hearing at 4 o'clock, which was directly before our board meeting, and then we will seek final approval for the budget at that time.
And just to add a little bit to that budget timeline, we did start back in February having conversations with our principals, and then whenever we did lose Learns, we had conversations with them about creating kind of their federal budgets, also along with their local budgets, of looking at staffing requirements, class sizes, and have kind of gone through that over the past couple of months too, so, to get ready for this.
Jim, you also, just where is the public hearing going to be?
It's here.
It's here, okay.
Yeah, I'm here, I have a copy of the budget available if anybody from the public wanted to come in. It's available for viewing and to answer some questions. Generally, it isn't well attended, but we hold that hearing each year and are prepared to make a presentation at that time.
How are they notified for the public hearing?
It's posted on the website. It's
Website.
also posted in the Lawrence County Advertiser, summary of our budget, just total general fund revenues and expenditures for the year, and the change from one budget to the next. That's a requirement by law, the
Thank
public
you.
posting of that.
Thank you.
Would you say it's not widely, not a wide participation from?
Generally, it's not.
Mm-mm. Just like everything else. No.
Okay. Next, just kind of wanted to go over some of the state revenue projections. Like I said, at this point, both the House and the Senate have passed their own versions of the bill. The only projections that we have received thus far for 25-26 is actually the projection that comes out of the House Ways and Means Committee. We receive it after those versions of the budget are passed. The South Carolina Department of Education makes the calculations and provides the information out to the school districts on what our proportionate share of that budget would be under that scenario. So the only one we've received so far is the Ways and Means Committee. But again, this is just a projection of those revenues. And also, we have given comparative information about our current 24-25 budget, as well as where we stand currently with our allocation for 24-25. So those, we pass our budget, our original projection is changed at day 45 based on those student counts, and then they're changed again at day 135 based on final student counts. So what we're seeing for the 24-25 is what we will end up receiving on those line items for the balance of this current fiscal year. So you can just kind of get an idea of where we stand now compared to what they would expect for us next year. I'll remind you that when we prepared our 24-25 budget, that we actually took the projections that we had been given and rounded it down into a more conservative figure, and you'll see that we still ended up taking a cut. Even still, with all of the conservatism that we put into it, you see there's about an $800,000 drop between what we budgeted for state revenues and what we will end up receiving for 24-25. Now, fortunately, we have had some increased collections in our local revenues that we hope to kind of have enough to offset all of that, and we'll just have to see how those finally shake out with our June 30 numbers. But I just show that to point out the struggles of the way education is funded and how difficult it can be to operate when you really don't know what you're going to receive until you're really deep into the year. But given that, with the additional revenue that they're planning to put into the funding model, currently we're scheduled to receive an increase of $1.127 million over what we are receiving at our current allocation level. So that's kind of an apples to apples of where we are now versus what they anticipate next year. That sounds like a lot. It really doesn't go very far once you get into the mandated increases in expenditures. But we'll have to see how everything comes out in the end once the House and Senate finish hashing out their versions of the budget. In the House budget, they increased the state aid to classrooms, which is the large line item, by $112 million, and that was mainly to fund a $1,500 across-the-board salary increase for teachers, and the minimum pay for a teacher with a bachelor's degree and 0 experience, the state minimum would be $48,500. So this is based on the House version, which is like the first bite at the budget. And you can see from this graphic that they also have quite a few line items that they have to consider, and it's not just the ones that we concern ourselves with in terms of the discussion over the general fund. The state has to consider education, but also many other areas of state government. But education is probably, I believe, the largest portion of the state budget. That's why they usually go over those items first. What we focus on generally is the general fund, because that's what the board approves, and it's what funds the lion's share of our district operations. But you can see here that even in the realm of education, outside of the general fund budget, they fund programs like CERDEP and First Steps, and a lot of time this year has been spent focusing on the Education Scholarship Trust Fund and how they're going to fund that voucher program potentially. But what we generally focus on are those general fund items that come to us in an unrestricted fashion, and this board is tasked with prioritizing those resources and putting them to good use. But again, we'll focus mainly on those two top items. It's the $1,500 salary increase, which generally, by the time you include, well, not generally, by the time you put FICA taxes and retirement benefits on top of that $1,500, it comes out to closer to $2,000 per teacher. With over 400 teachers in our district, we estimate that salary increase with benefits would cost us around $830,000 to fund those teacher pay increases. That's not to mention any other district employee. So if you're looking at an increase of $1.1 million and you already have $830,000 of it just going to the teachers.
So I'll make sure I understand. So we're about to face the state approving or requiring districts like ours to increase the salaries, but they're not, right now we don't know if they're going to provide any budgetary relief for doing that?
Well, the $112 million that they've increased, they have added a specific $112 million to the state's to the state's education budget to fund that increase.
Okay, so we can anticipate that with this increase, first bullet point, that the state is going to fund that we're not going to we don't have to consider that a deficit.
If you go back to that first graphic, that the 24.6 million is the state aid to classrooms. That's where that would reside.
Okay, great, thank you.
And that they also mandate an increase in the bus driver pay. That's an increase of 2% of the state portion of all district employees. Those are the ones that the state kind of mandates. You have to pay this position this much. Everything else is kind of up to a district's discretion, but for teachers and bus drivers, we are required to meet a minimum salary schedule that they publish each year. Like I said, last Wednesday, the Senate passed their own version of the budget, which was primarily in agreement with the House version of the budget. The main point of difference will be in how to handle the increased cost of the state health insurance plan. The House version increases the employee share of the health insurance premium for the first time in many, many years. It's been locked at the same rate for a long time. So the House was saying that they were going to increase that by about $441 a year, so $30-something a month. But they get a $1,500 raise, and if you come in there with a $441 health insurance premium increase, that really kind of eats into that. So the Senate version added additional funding to cover an increase in the employer share. The Senate would have the employer share growing, which is really what we normally see on a year-to-year basis, is they give us a percentage increase in the employer portion, and then they theoretically provide the funding to cover that. So right now, I think it's a 4.3% increase that the Senate is proposing in the employer share of health insurance, and then they would provide the funding through the state aid to classrooms or as a separate line item to cover that increase. I've included a draft schedule of the 25-26 teacher salary pay schedule. I don't know if you can read it on your slide. It's very small,
No.
but it's across the board, $1,500 increase. So that would bring, that's $1,500 per cell, so that would bring the minimum pay for a bachelor's with 0 years of experience to $48,500. Teacher would also receive a step increase based on an increase in experience. We are also planning to maintain the bachelor's plus 18 salary schedule, even though the state is eliminating that certification on their salary schedule. So when they say they're increasing all teachers $1,500, in reality, if you're a bachelor's plus 18 and they eliminate your schedule, they're going to push you back to bachelor's, which means a $1,000 increase. There's a $500 difference between, at the bottom of the scale, between the bachelor's and a bachelor's plus 18. So we are still anticipating maintaining that schedule so long as we have employees that are on that schedule. And it is assumed that if the state eliminates the pay scale for bachelor's plus 18, that the Department of Education will likely stop certifying that. So right now we have teachers whose certificates say that they're certified at bachelor's plus 18, which means we have to pay them on this salary scale. At that point, if they quit certifying it, then there's nobody else would be added to that schedule. We would still maintain that schedule, provided we still had our own employees. I think we have 20-something teachers currently that are paid on the bachelor's plus 18. And it's just it's an intermediate step between bachelor's and master's.
And I want to make sure I'm perfectly clear on this. This table is governed by the state.
Well, let me be really, really clear. Mostly, yes. The schedule that I've included is our salary schedule.
Okay.
So we take the state minimum salary schedule and then we add a local supplement to that.
Okay.
But the increase from where we were last year, our district's salary schedule, and the one that I've provided is just a $1,500 across the board increase, which reflects no change to the supplement amount and an increase in the state portion.
So what you showed us in this slideshow is what you've added.
Correct.
Okay.
That is an across the board $1,500 increase over 24-25.
So if a current teacher is working for us, they'll get $1,500 plus a step in their scale. So they would kind of go down a row and plus 1,500.
Right.
I would point out that our funding is not dependent on how many teachers we have or how much experience they have. We are funded based on student numbers. So weighted, but what drives our funding is the number of students in our classrooms, and then we have to determine how we're going to staff that school to provide the education for them.
What's that cost per student right now?
There is no base student cost. That's what they eliminated. So now they say if you've got 5,000, 6,000 kids, based on this model that has an average teacher salary and an average student to teacher ratio, we're going to give you this much money. But within that, it's not just funding the students in the class, the teachers in the classroom. That's the funding for the entire district. So really, it's a model that caps what the state puts into the funding model.
What's
Whereas
that
the old
total?
base student cost model, if the districts picked up additional children, the state would have to fund additional money into
Right.
education. Now, with the new model, they define what they're going to put into the education funding model, into the aid to classrooms, and it's just a matter of how it gets divvied up. So it's just a matter, we're just vying for our slice of the pie. So you take a district like ours that is in a non-high growth area,
Right.
you could grow a little bit, but if you don't outpace the average growth, you could actually receive fewer dollars.
Exactly.
Because what goes into the education funding model is capped. We're not, this isn't Horry County or Greenville County. We anticipate some growth, but we're not a high growth area, and that is really what drives that volatility in that state aid to classrooms. That's why we're experiencing an $800,000 increase despite budgeting less than we were projected to receive.
How many students do we have?
We hover right around 5,000.
5,000?
Yes, ma'am.
So is it our plan to maintain the the bachelor's plus 18 as an ongoing program, or is that just going to grandfather in those that are currently in it?
It would be grandfathering in those that are in it. If the state quits certifying it, right now, a teacher's certificate says what their level of certification is. So, it might say either bachelor's plus 18, master's plus 30, or doctorate. And that tells us which schedule to put them on. If they eliminate bachelor's plus 18, there will be no additional certifications for that. So no one at that point would be added to the bachelor's plus 18 schedule. But the ones that we already had on there, hopefully they're working toward their masters and would eventually get bumped up. But it should just be fewer and fewer actually on that schedule until eventually it's unnecessary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So as you can see, our jobs aren't going to get any easier. We still have a lot of challenges ahead of us. We have to match up all the resources that we have to a seemingly endless list of demands. On the state side of our funding, really our hands are kind of tied. There's nothing we do that can increase that number. It's wholly driven by the students in the classroom. Again, if unless we have growth that outpaces other districts in the state, that number is not going to go up. We don't have a final number from them yet, but once we get it, it's just it is what it is. On the local side, we have seen some increases in our tax collections and just our local property tax revenues. That is somewhat within your control as a board. It's an option that we have not utilized in 12 years. It's an actual millage increase. If the board chose to do that, it has to be done in conjunction with District 56 because we have to have a uniform operating millage. Our current operating millage is 167.5 operating mills. According to the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office, the state says that we can increase, this board has the ability to increase that millage by up to 5.67%, which would be a 9 mil increase in our operating millage. Last year, for 23-24, at the end of the year, the value of a mill was $120,640. The auditor's office provided today that so far this year, a mill has produced $135,904. That's not final. But if you estimate that at $130,000 a mill, a maximum increase, the most that you could do would provide nearly $1.2 million to our general fund budget, or to our general fund. Of course, the board could approve anywhere from 0 mills, which is what we've done for the last 12 years, up to a total of 9 mills.
So in saying that, this 1.2 million potentially, if we were to increase something 9 mills, what does that mean for taxpayers? Because that is not taxes that a homeowner would pay. That is on rented properties, that is on businesses. Help clarify some of those points as far as who would see an increase.
Sure. So your owner-occupied residence, if you pay attention to your tax bill, it has a tax on there for education.
It
And you see
does.
a credit on there
But you
that
also get a credit,
offsets.
right.
So it's actually in everything, we just don't receive it. So what that primarily falls to would be non-owner occupied residential, business property, business personal property, equipment, vehicles, any other property that is taxed by Lawrence County would be subject to that millage at their assessment rate.
Okay. Thank you. With the keep
No,
going, sorry.
please go ahead, because I was getting ready to move to a different topic.
No, that's okay. I didn't have any other questions on that. So you may answer my question and I don't even have to ask it. So
You're
you
probably
keep
not. I'm getting
moving.
ready to go to capital items, so if it's about operations, we probably need to go ahead and hash it out.
Well, it's really about the overall budget.
now's a good time.
Okay, so based on projections that you've seen out of the House and the Senate and what they're putting in front of you currently, what's our budget right now? If we were to take everything and roll it over, what's our deficit? What's our positive? Where are we?
We are actually too early in the process to actually even give you that. The only projection we've received is out of a committee. So it takes, by the time the House passes a version of the budget or the Senate passes a version of the budget, and then the South Carolina Department of Education runs through the calculations, and they're the ones who actually give us our projection. So I think that the House budget is fairly close to and so what we're looking at right now is an increase of 1.1 million over where we are currently, which is needed, but that is still less, well, it is more than what we budgeted for 24-25. So we've got operational decisions to make that are, we're not going to fix our issues with state funding. They're not, they don't seem inclined to up what they're doing. You know, on the county level, we do have some ability. You have some ability in conjunction with our neighboring district that you can drive some additional revenue. But the primary answer is going to be on the expenditure side. You know, we know that we have to balance that.
Right. Well, I know that some districts, I know even Ware Shoals put out this week an article, and they've estimated so far to the penny what they think their deficit's going to be. So I was hoping that we would have some sort of number tonight to look at, but it doesn't sound like. I don't know. I assume they just used the projections that were coming out of the state
It would be
to do
a
that.
wild guess. You know, at this point, we're still determining how we're going to staff our buildings with the loss of the LEARNS grant. So our total number of people is likely to change between now and next year. Until we finalize that staffing, I mean, it's pretty easy to, you know, once we know, you know, teacher-wise, you know, we know what that 1,500 increase is going to cost us. We know where we can place somebody on a salary schedule. And obviously, teachers are the biggest part of our employee base. But it's, you know, there's still a whole lot of other moving pieces. I dare say that if someone did a projection now, that it's a wild guess.
So the House still has to meet and approve. So after, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's supposed to be May possible May the 8th. So
Yeah. So the Senate, the House has passed a version.
the House has, so
The
the
House
Senate
has,
is meeting.
the Senate has passed a version also. So
Okay.
that version goes back to the House where they can concur with the Senate version or make their own changes. And then any differences that they don't iron out will go to a conference committee. The conference committee, I think, consists of 3 House members and 3 Senate members. They come up with a compromise version that then goes back to both houses, gets passed, and goes to the governor. The biggest bone of contention, and I don't think it's contentious, but the biggest difference is in how we're going to handle health insurance. We seem pretty well a lock on that $1,500 increase and how they're funding that. So that $112 million that they're adding into the model to cover that is I think that's probably pretty much what's going to happen. The question is that other line item for the health insurance portion. Obviously, if the Senate gets their way in that, that line item would go up for us, but it goes with the cost of health insurance. Honestly, if the House gets their way and that cost goes to the employees, then we have a more difficult conversation because we would have the knowledge of knowing that every employee in the district that is on the state health insurance plan would be absorbing $400 additional a year. In many cases, the raises aren't much more than that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in the case of a teacher, you know, it sounds bad enough to say that you increased them $1,500 and then took away $400. But many of our positions don't make near as much, and it's percentage-wise, it's a much
Which
harder hit.
Brings to my next reason I was ramping up to this was, is it safe that by May, can you get us some real numbers?
Oh, we will have We will have real numbers in May.
Okay, that's what we need, because if we need to make some decisions here, I think we need some solid percentage, some values about what we're gonna anticipate here.
Yeah, this isn't the beginning of the conversation, but
Right.
this is really I guess we're entering into the brass tacks phase.
You know, obviously, we either need to decrease what we're spending or increase what we're bringing in. I mean, that's the two ways to fix this. And
Yes.
I guess my question to you then, have you done any analysis to look and see the feasibility of, or a combination of decreasing our expenses or increasing our revenue? Is there a recommendation coming from our CFO? It's like, don't put this on my shoulders.
This particular CFO prefers to be more of a scorekeeper and stay in my lane on how to prioritize our spending.
So what we have been doing is we have been meeting with principals and knowing that we were cleaning up our teacher allocations based on class size. So we went through and put a class size ratio on all the schools that may have had very small ratios, 14, 15 in some middle school classrooms, to kind of realign those with like a 22, 25 kind of class size reduction. So we've gone through and kind of pulled back some of those allocations based on class size. And so doing that, we looked at also with the LEARNs kind of going away. We knew we were going to have to kind of try to absorb about 10 positions prior to losing LEARNs. So we were trying to kind of scale that on up to in the 20s. So we've kind of gone through and looked at about 20 positions that we could either collapse, combine, or try to kind of increase some class size in some areas that way. So we've done that. We've looked at utilizing some of our federal funds in different ways to be able to, instead of hiring a couple of retirees, put that to a class teacher versus interventionists. So, we've done different things. It's not been a one only swoop. It's been several bites to try to get to 20 to 30 positions. So.
One
I have-
thing,
I
oh,
have
go
a
ahead.
question. What is being looked at a district office level as far as those positions and higher paid salaries on some of those jobs potentially being cut?
We've looked at, we've got several positions posted right now as retirees, looking at if any of those positions could be combined, reduced, and looking at how we can roll some of those positions together.
Okay.
So we are looking at some of that. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Thank you.
So back in October, and I've mentioned this a couple of different times, I had sent you the information that I had learned through the School Board Association, a presentation I attended regarding starting your budget from zero. And the person that presented the information sent me the whole file, how to go through that process. Have we gone through that process?
We have been working on revamping I just lost the name of it, the position control, which then takes us back to zero to actually start adding those positions back in to positions and looking at those positions growing, what's required at each one of those schools based on teachers with our class size. So did we say everything's down to zero and put it out? No, but we have the teaching positions is one component of that. Then we'll go through and do the similar thing with supplies, O&M, which I know O&M falls into different, but, contracted services and that type of thing. So
When's the last time we've gone back to zero and built our budget up?
Never.
And see, I think that's a problem, and I think that when you keep just rolling over and rolling over and rolling over, you tend to lose things. We all sat here, well, not every one of us, but a handful of us sat here a couple of years ago when not one person in this building could answer my questions on stipends for athletics. And I realize that is a very small portion of our budget. I get that. But no one could answer the question. And so I thought that it was very important that we start on a clean slate and build our budget from ground up, from zero up. So I'm a little bit surprised that we're hearing that we really haven't done that.
Well, I think that maybe there's a little difference in understanding. We justify major pockets of expenditures. There are certain things, I mean, you could go back, you could take it to zero, but you're immediately back to what it costs. For instance, energy consumption, electricity, for instance, we know what that's roughly going to cost us, and we take every effort we can to minimize that. So we don't have, I don't believe a scenario where someone looks at it and says, oh, well, I have this much money available for electricity, I'm going to leave the light on tonight. So, you know, there's certain things that we can't just drive to zero.
The point is you're making, when you start fresh, you are laying your eyes and thoughts and review on everything.
And I can say that
Yeah.
we have looked at every single line of a 80-page budget, going through and saying, do we need this much? Do we need that much? Can we take 10% off of this out of all these supplies? You know, we worked very hard last year in the spring to come with a budget that whenever we knew we were bringing to this board a budget that was $650,000 in the red, we looked, we dug, we looked at everything as a line that how much does it cost us the past couple of years? How much do we need to budget this year? And so we did that line by line, looking at those expenditures. So when you know it's going to cost you X, you don't have to go down to zero, you can just put X. And I feel like that's more of our mentality of how we have built our budget on each activity. You know, are there things that we can do away with? Yes, and we have. You know, are there some pockets that needed to be condensed? Yes. Did we take all the OIG reports and take all the food funding that we had used out of 15 different pots and put it in one? Yes. So we tried to pull all those together to try to look at that. So I hate to say we didn't go back to a zero, but we went back to knowing what we have spent and then looked at what the requirements were. Did we need to keep spending it, and then budget based on that. So.
Yeah, I don't feel like we carelessly just say, what did we have last year, and we add to it. We don't do that. But for instance, we fund our schools equitably, right? So if when we're allocating various supplies, be it instructional supplies or O&M supplies to a school, it's going to be based on that school's needs, whether, you know, a lot of things are kind of allocated based on enrollment, for instance. And then we give the we give the principals the flexibility on how they're going to spend those funds. You know, you take O&M related supplies, you know, some of that's based on the size of the school. Some of it's based on the age of the school. So, you know, where a Ford or Gray Court's going to need more or less than a Waterloo, for instance. But we're very careful to go line by line, like Dr. Penland said, and justify those dollars. Just don't literally take it back to zero. But I think that the board should feel comfortable to know that we certainly scrutinize the budget, that it's not just an assumption that we're going to continue on. We know that there are things that we have to shave, you know, and everything is on the table. You know, whether it be a position, you know, we don't want to have people in our district that don't have a function that's valuable and contributes to student success, or whether it be, you know, the supplies we purchase. You know, we try to make good use of the dollars. You know, especially now that we've hired a procurement director, we've started really competing a lot of the expenditures. They're doing evaluations of proposals for the copier contracts this year to try to drive those costs and hopefully see a little bit of savings. We've taken a more of a district-wide approach to bidding out landscaping, you know, lawn maintenance services and things, instead of where in the past we, allowed this school to do theirs and this school to do theirs and this school to do theirs. We're trying to leverage the buying power of the entire district to come up with some savings in those areas. And that's, Brian's major function is to go through and drive those things. And so, we're certainly not perfect, and, perfection will probably never be obtained, but we certainly try to get better and better each day and evaluate how we're using our funds. At the end of the day, it doesn't benefit any of us to have waste in the system.
Well, I don't think perfection is the goal, it's just being fiscally responsible. And that
Fiscal
falls on
responsibility is certainly a goal.
all of us, yes.
Sure, yeah. And I hope I wasn't coming off combative. I think that it's just, I think that we are making efforts and doing the types of things that you're encouraging. Literally taking a budget back to zero and building it back piece by piece, no, we haven't done that. But we have made cuts where we've been able to make cuts, and we'll continue to look for additional ways to save and cut.
Are we saying one of the ways that we're gonna cut is the class, room size? I think the average now is about 14. And you're gonna increase it to about 22 maybe?
Well, it's based on grade bands, so the early childhood classrooms will stay smaller. So we'll shoot around 15, when we get into upper L, 18 to 20, middle school, 22 to
Okay.
25. So it'll be based on grade bands.
Any more questions on the operating side of our budget before we move on to our capital items? Okay. The other area that we normally discuss as part of this project is our capital projects. Each year, the district issues a general obligation bond that is paid off within the fiscal year. The first portion of that goes to cover the payment of the Lead Corporation debt for 25-26. That'll be $3,113,163. We know that because it's fixed. But what's left over after we borrow what we're able to borrow under that 8% debt limitation, approximately $3.8 million, but that's to be determined, and we really won't know until we do the bond issue. But that gets allocated out to our capital projects, and we present a list of projects to the board each year for your approval. Like I said, right now we estimate that to be about $3.8 million. Could be more or less. Interest rates have dropped somewhat. We did our second bond issue today, which just covers the interest portion of the Lead debt, and it actually came back at like 4.39%. I think last year, the same time, it was like 5.1. So we've had a decent drop in rates, and anytime the rate drops, what we are able to buy increases in relation to that. This current year, we had $1.6 million that we allocated toward the cost of the Sanders project to build the classroom addition there. So obviously that project will come off. It will not be included in the 25-26 budget. We have
I
other,
thought that project was covered by ESSER funds.
is primarily under ESSER funds, but there was not enough available in ESSER to cover it. So we allocated $1.6 million of our capital bond issue to cover any overages. Right now,
Gotcha.
we're doing well. I don't think we're going to need all of it, so we'll probably reallocate that to another project, knock on wood. But that was a big chunk of what we did for 24-25, was to make sure that we didn't have an inability to finish that project.
The
And that-
ESSER funds had $4 million written into it for Sanders.
Okay. And the 1.6, is there a time frame that has to be spent? Does it have to be spent within the calendar,
No.
the fiscal year? No, okay.
Well, just generally speaking, it's not good to borrow it and not use it. So,
Right.
but no, there's not a timeline. It's not a grant. This is money that the district has borrowed for the purposes of capital projects. So as long as we use it for capital projects, we're not in violation of any kind of laws. Once we conclude the Sanders project and know how much is available, we'll probably come back to the board with a suggestion on what project to allocate those additional funds to.
Okay, gotcha. So that could be used to, say, resurface tennis courts,
Or roofing or
or
something like that.
whatever,
yeah.
yeah, okay. That's just the most recent plug that
That's the most
someone gave
recent
me,
crack
so,
that you went
yeah.
through.
Some random,
So, there you go.
We were all out on the court the
it
other
could
day
be used to
looking at that.
resurface the
So,
Conlon's floor.
Yeah,
yes.
But anything within the realm of our capital project list, it could be reallocated to that. So, like I said, hopefully, so far that project has not gone over budget. As long as we're able to maintain that here in the finishing stages, there should be some funds left over that we would be able to allocate to something else. In addition to this 3.8 million probably that we'll be doing for 25, 26.
okay, so the 3.8 million, you're saying would be remaining to fund the property purchase, a classroom, a portable classroom at GCO, and then upgrades, HVAC, things of that nature. So
You don't
that
fill
one's
the
kind of
number yet.
a catch-all, but how 3.8 million doesn't seem to cover all of those things, or will it?
I think whenever you get the final budget, and I think whenever we look at the old budgets, it's got more of a line item that says roofing X amount. It'll have HVAC updates X amount, and so it'll be more of a line item for all that 3.8 to show you how much each one of those is allocated for that.
Okay.
And so what we were thinking of the 1.6 was that it would be able to break out to cover the Anderson Drive, to cover the portable classrooms, and then have a little bit left over for that. So to be able to push out some other areas. But that's a lot of what we have done in the past with those funds, is just kind of allocate so much for some of that general upkeep that we have to do.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look back, it seems like every year we have some large line item. This year, for instance, it's the Sanders project. I think last year it was $1.4 million for the high school roofing. Generally it's roofing that kind of, HVAC is gonna hurt us a lot also. When we're exploring some additional options on, some arrangements that might allow us to utilize some of these dollars to make the payments on another arrangement that may allow us to do some bigger ticket items where it's hard for us to budget for something like $500,000 worth of HVAC units for one building, for instance. That may or may not be a real scenario. But it seems like every year we always have some sort of large project that we're trying to budget for. And then, this year it was Sanders. So next year, these are the ones that we've kind of identified at this point. And there will be others. We'll have a list for your approval when we present the budget in May. But we certainly anticipate, this board voted to start the negotiations on the Anderson Drive property for the bus lot. Those have been good discussions. I think that will likely move forward. We do have some space issues at Gray Court and with moving students from some classrooms in order to allow us to get in those rooms and hopefully do some work and bring them back up to where they need to be. So likely we're looking at portable classrooms at GCO. We've got, and every year we always budget, you remember seeing a line item called building upgrades. And that's where it's like, we don't know exactly what it is, but something's going to come up and we're going to have to do it right away. And so there will be those normal line items as well. But those are the big ones that we're looking at right now.
Now, would the portable classrooms be able to be moved to other school locations if there was a need for them in the
Yeah.
future?
We would own them, and then we can just move them and set them
Okay.
up in other places based on kind of connectability and all that kind of stuff with
Sure.
everything.
But I will point out, I think it's important for you to know that we're committed to making this work, that Dr. Penland's vision of building a five-star culture of excellence permeates everything that we're doing here as a district. Finance is part of that. Fiscal responsibility is certainly a part of that. And every one of us has a job to do to contribute, our small part toward the ultimate goals of student success, satisfied staff, and a community that supports what we've got going on here. So those are the challenges. Those are what we're seeing right now. Just kind of wanted to make sure that you guys were up to date on what we're seeing as we enter into this challenging budget season. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone have any more questions or comments? All right, with no further business on our agenda, I will adjourn our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.